Big question that's going to be wrangled over for the next 20 years. Obviously, there were some great players who, Clemens, Bonds, they were Hall of Famers before they touched anything. But as a fan, especially baseball, the numbers are always sacred. If you ask me who the all-time home run leader, it's Hank Aaron, 755. The single season, Roger Maris, 61, without an asterisk. I think that was what really turned a lot of people off, is all of a sudden you have these guys hitting 66, 70 home runs. It's ridiculous. Eventually they're going to have to come to grips with that. On the one hand, if you're a player and you're making a lot of money and all of a sudden you look at the next locker and this guy is huge and you're in danger of being out of work, and a guy says, yeah, if you do this, you can play. I'm not sure. I'd like to say I wouldn't do it, but I don't know. On the other hand, everybody was guilty in that era, and I think the Commissioner Selig and Don Fair, the Players Union, they've got blood on their hands. Obviously, they knew what was going on. You didn't have to be a doctor to look at these guys. Human beings don't get that way. I'm sorry. You could spend time in the weight room all you want. You're not going to get the way that those guys got. Their arms were cartoonish. And the fact that the commissioner, the owners knew what was going on, that if the union had said, okay, this is bad, we're going to start testing in 1995, Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens would be in the Hall of Fame right now. He would have saved them from that. So I think, it's not just the guys that did it, but I'm not sure I've got the right answer, but somebody is going to have to come up with something.
Growing up just outside Cooperstown, it's been a tough issue for me to wrestle with too. And I go back there a couple times every year. When my son was 5 years old and started playing t-ball, I took him to the Hall of Fame for the first time, and I started telling him who Babe Ruth was and who Hank Aaron was and all that sort of stuff. And over time, as news would come out about PEDs and steroids, it was, a topic of discussion with my son. Here's, what some players decided to do to cheat the game. And I don't think you can reward those players in the Hall. But one of your points was also, is it a Hall of Fame or a museum? The name is actually the Hall of Fame and museum. It's both. And the museum part of it can maybe do a better job. I think they need to have an exhibit of, the steroid era. But there's certainly some of those stories are told on the museum side. And I just think the difficult thing is for the writers who have to decide. Everyone knows that maybe Bonds and A-Rod and McGuire did steroids. There's too many other players where you just don't know. And they have to play judge and jury, and that's extremely difficult. And it's going to be something that it's really stolen the thunder from all the legitimate players that are up for election every year, too. And it gets lost in the shuffle of what they did legitimately because everyone's talking about, well, should this person get in even though he did some steroids, and what degree of steroids did they do? And it's just unfortunate for the whole game of baseball. So I don't have an answer, but I do know that the Hall of Fame and Museum has lasted this long, and I think it's still going to have a legacy that people are going to want to come and visit, but it's always going to be a little hole there. If you don't have a whole generation of greatest players indoctrinated there, then it's always going to be a little off in terms of what it showcases.
Well, actually, coming from a museum background, I am all on board with the fact that the Hall of Fame and Museum needs to do a better job of actually telling that story, because it is an important story in the scope of the history of the game. I actually like Jeff's idea of the more unique-looking wing, but if not, like I said, having the much better look at the entire story. And actually, I think for Pete's next project, I think it would be absolutely wonderful to be able to sit down, for instance, with a Barry Bonds or an Alex Rodriguez and probe them to the degree of saying why, with the fact that you would have been in the Hall of Fame, on just your skills, what led you down the road
it's an interesting thing, John. Years ago, Lee Montville won the Spitball Award for his book on Ted Williams. And there was a group about this size, and there was a Q&A. And somebody said to Lee, what do you think Ted Williams would say about performance-enhancing drugs? Now, most of us, certainly myself, were figuring it would be the usual bromide. And Lee's answer was, Ted Williams probably would have taken him in a New York Minute. And upon reflection, he may have been right. There are people who are that competitive that they would do anything to get a leg up. Does that make it right? Absolutely not. I worked in track and field for 25 years, okay? And I saw people who might have been like a 10.5 sprinter suddenly develop into world record holders because they were on drugs. When you can see the yellow in their eyes, because their bodies couldn't metabolize the anabolic steroids, you knew something was wrong. They cheated. No, imagine this. Imagine if I cheat on my SATs and you guys don't get in and I do. That's not right. If you guys cheat on your income taxes and I don't, that makes a sucker out of me. I don't get to vote on the Baseball Hall of Fame. I do vote on the National Track and Field Hall of Fame. I'll never vote for anybody who took drugs. Anybody who is known to have taken drugs in sports, I'm not going to vote for them. You know, there's also a parallel between this and hippodrome. It's betting on games in the early 20th and 19th century. I think there was a book that came out a while back, Matt, about the 1918 World Series, where the accusations were that some of the games may have been thrown, and that set the tone for 1919. We'll never know who was involved in throwing games. Those that we do know of are people like Hal Chase, Harl Maggart, people like that, they're banned from life. Let it be. And anybody that took drugs in sports, let it be that they're never allowed in the Hall of Fame either.
I wanted to add a little bit to the PED and Pete Rose debate, but then I